What's up guys, it's Out of Order. Welcome back to the channel. This is where I teach you guys everything you need to know about After Effects, and in this video I'll be showing you how to recreate that intro I showed you in the preview of this video. So without wasting any more time, let's get right on into the tutorial. So the first thing we're going to want to do is load up After Effects. So I have it right here, and we're just going to import some clips into After Effects. Now you will need world clips, so you're going to need clips that don't have the view model or HUD or anything like that on screen. I'll put a list of games on screen that you can't do this on. However, if you want to try this out yourself, I'll leave a link in the description down below to some world clips, depth clips, and all that good stuff. So once you have your world, depth, and green screen clips all downloaded, what we're gonna do is import them into After Effects. So as you can see, I got my world, green screen, and depth already imported. Now you're gonna want to make a composition and make sure the composition is the same resolution as your clips. So mine is 1600 by 900, and I'm just gonna do 24 for the FPS. Now these clips are 600 FPS, but they do need to have the world only, so you can't have the view model or HUD like I said earlier, and I'll explain why in a minute. So once you got your clips imported, you're just going to want to key light the green screen. So as you can see, we got the gun over here. I'm just going to add key light, select it right there. Now I already have a preset that does like a lot of this stuff for me, but you're going to want to mess with these settings right here on the screen map. Now what this is basically just softening the edges and stuff, and sometimes you want to mess with the balance too, because your colors might be messed up depending on what your view model is. So as you guys can see, these are the settings I use right here. Now this basically, just like I said, softens the edges and stuff to make sure that you don't have like any jagged edges. But another thing you can add is the plugin called FXAA. This is a free to use plugin made by Plugin Everything, and it basically just softens the edges even more. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, I'm going to be turning off the depth layer because we won't be needing that anymore. Now I'm going to show you how to motion track particles and such. Now to motion track particles, we're going to want to find our world layer and then Control-Shift-D to cut the world layer. Now we're going to cut out a small section to what we want to motion track. So let's just say maybe right here to after you get the kill. So like, yeah, this small part right here, we're going to motion track it. So basically what we did in the preview of this video. Now the reason you're going to need world clips is because most people are editing like modern games and stuff, or like something like Valorant or Apex, where you have the gun and the world clip all on one. So like they're not separated at all. And same with the depth. You probably don't even have depth at all. But the reason you're going to want to have them separate, so I'll put a list of games that can do that on screen as well. And that is because if you motion track with the gun, like let's say like this, your track is probably going to fail like 99% of the time. Or if you have the HUD on screen, it's probably gonna fail. Now this tutorial will work on any clip that has them separated, or if you actually shot some camera footage, so let's say you just actually filmed some stuff and you want to motion track, you can do this on it as well. I'm just giving you guys a heads up that if you have your view model, which is this thing right here, or if you have the HUD on screen, it's probably not gonna work. Any other clip is fine though. So with that all being said, let's get on to the motion tracking part. So once you split up your clip to the part you want to motion track, just right click on it, go to track and stabilize, and click on track camera, and then now all we gotta do is wait a few minutes and this will be done. Now if you get the analysis solve failed error, there's not a whole lot you can do because that pretty much just means your footage isn't really trackable at that point. So if that happens, you can just try tracking a different time or using an entirely different clip. Now as you guys can see, my clip worked fine, so now we're on to the next step, which is just compositing different stuff. So if you saw in the preview of the video, what I had was I tracked many different particles using Trapcode particular, some lights all around the scene, and some overlays as well. So I guess we'll start off with motion tracking overlays since this is the easiest one to do. So you're just going to import any overlays you have. Now if you don't know where to get overlays, it's pretty easy. You can just go on YouTube and search up smoke overlays, or go on Google Images and just type in like smoke or fire or pretty much any asset you want to composite into here. I'm using the Infinity assets. I'll leave a link to it down below in the description as well. And this is just basically a pack with a ton of different overlays. So we got like dust, ember, energy, shock, you know, stuff like that. But these are pretty easy to find. So if you know where to look, just go on like YouTube or Google Images. And then once you download a few, we're pretty much good to go. So if I solo my world layer and render track points, we can pretty much composite these anywhere on the scene. So I guess we'll start maybe in the middle. So what I'm going to do is just select a few points right here. That's actually not a few, that's a lot. But we can either do a solid or a null. Now I prefer motion tracking a solid because it's actually visual and you can actually see like what direction it's facing. So as you can see, there's our solid right there. Now if I solo the little overlay as well, now we're going to need to make it a 3D layer. So to do that, we're going to click on this cube icon right here. And basically this means that it's going to be affected in 3D space. I don't know why my voice just cracked right there, but yeah, as you guys can see, it's motion tracked in our scene as well. Now to actually motion track it, we have two options. We can either parent it, which is kind of stupid because I'm just going to end up deleting the solid anyway. But what we can do is click on position, Control C, click on this position, and Control V. Now that's just going to basically give it the same position values as our solid. So we can delete the solid now because we won't need it anymore. And now our thing is pretty much in the shot exactly where we wanted it. Now, obviously, that's not really a cool position to put it, so I'm going to increase the Y values like this, or you can click on the green handle and do it like this, and the X handle as well if you want to move it in there, and the Z, of course, as well. Now, I prefer dragging on these values over here, but you can use those as well. Just whatever you do, don't just click on the whole thing and move it around like that, because your coordinates will be all messed up. So now that we have it in the right place we want it, I'm just going to resize it by pressing S on the scale here. So if we click on that, press S, we can resize it as well, and we're going to want to change the blending mode as well too, so you can do either screen, add, or lighten. That's for if it has a black background. Most of the time I either do add or screen. In this instance, I think we'll just keep it as screen. Now, as you can see, we have it in our shot, kind of like a nice little spiral tornado effect almost. Now, another thing you're going to need to do is enable frame blending. This won't have an effect right now, but once you start doing velocity and syncing and stuff, you're going to want your overlays to be frame blended. So we're just going to go over here, click on this, and click on it twice so that it has a little arrow effect. Now, if that's missing, you're going to want to make sure these are enabled right here in the bottom left corner. So if we click on that, it'll turn that on, which is where all our values are. And then this right here will turn on our blending modes. So that's pretty cool now that we got our little particles motion tracked and such, our overlays. Now all we got to do is composite it better. So I'm going to add some tint effects. You can use either just normal tint or S tint, or if you want to, you can also use VC color vibrance. But for this instance, I'm just going to do tint. Now, the preview I showed at the beginning was sort of like blue purplish one. So I think for this one, we're going to go with, let's do it green, honestly. Yeah, let's try making it green. So now that we got green on the little tint right there, as you can see, it's starting to come together. Now, I'm going to also add another tint effect on the world layer as well. So if we go like this, we'll add S tint. You could do an actual like color grade on this as well if you want to. But that's if you want to get more precise with like how you want your scene to look. In this instance, I think it's fine, so I'm just gonna make it a slight green, and boom, now our shot's starting to come together. Now, what I also did in the preview was, honestly, I had like 10 different overlays, so let's just try another one. Let's just try duality 1. I don't know what this effect looks like, however, it's the name of a Slipknot song, so screw it, we might as well try it out. So now that we have our other overlay imported, let's add another tint on it as well. Now, you're gonna want to blend these a lot. Most people would probably just copy and paste it, but honestly, that looks kind of doofy, so I'm gonna use like maybe a different shade of green. Maybe like this. Maybe something like that will look fine. So once again, we're going to make it a 3D layer as well by clicking this button right here. And then I'm going to enable frame blending. Now, what I can do is I can press P on our other overlay, press P on the new overlay. And I'm going to copy and paste the position value from the old overlay to the new one. So now they're pretty much directly on top of each other, which is fine. I mean, if you want to composite more stuff, but in this instance, I don't really want it to be on top of each other. So I guess I'll just mess with the position values. So if we do this, maybe move it more over here, move it a bit lower, a little bit closer. And now we can also mess with the rotation as well. Now, I don't recommend using orientation. Honestly, I think orientation is a pretty useless thing to have on here. I mean, it's only useful in a few instances, but in this instance right here, we're not going to really need it unless you plan on animating these overlays. So yeah, we're just going to slap it on like this. And as you can see, we got a ton of different overlays going on. Now I'm going to add another overlay. We're going to do the smoke overlay. Now this one's a little bit different and I'll explain why. So let me get the original position value, copy and paste it here, place it over here. Now, as you can see, we got this right here. Let me resize this as well. Now, you're probably noticing one thing, and that is that the edges clip. So if I change this to a screen, you'll see that the edges are kind of being clipped, which doesn't really look that good. What I like to do is get the ellipse tool, make sure it's selected by holding down on it, and then just double click on it. Now, what that's going to do is make a perfect ellipse right here. Now, you don't need to do the ellipse tool. You can manually make your own mask and make it as like detailed as you want it to be. But in this instance, it's fine, so I'm gonna do this. Now I'm gonna lower the mask expansion so it's like kind of cutting it off more, and then we can feather it right here. Now what this is gonna do is just basically soften the edges like that, so now you can't really tell that anything's being clipped there. So once again, we can of course resize it, move the position of it, maybe bring it a little bit even closer like that, maybe add another S tint onto it, and boom, now our scene's starting to come together. Now this is starting to look pretty good, and like I said, you guys can use any overlay you want. I'm using the Infinity assets, but like I said, any overlay will work fine. Even if it's just an image on Google Images, it'll still look pretty cool. Now in the preview I shown at the beginning of this video, I used Trapcode Particular, but I'm not going to be using it in this video because I've already made a ton of videos on it, as well as most people don't really have the plugins. So for this instance, we're just going to be sticking to like no plugins, even though I'm using S-Tint, but then again, regular tint will work fine, or VC Color Vibrance, which is free. But nevertheless, the next thing we're going to do is compositing lights into our scene. Now I think lighting is going to have the biggest impact on the scene, so to do that, we're going to right click on our little timeline, go to new, and create a new light object. Now make sure you have it on point or spot, unless you want to like, I don't know, unless you want a spotlight. Most of the time I do point. Now for fall off, make sure it's on inverse squared. Make sure the radius is like, you know, it doesn't really matter for now, but yeah, we're just going to create that light right there. And now you'll notice right away that like everything disappeared. Either it did disappear or it didn't, but for me it disappeared. So if we go to like, let's just click on our duality and go over here to our light, press P on the light, and we're going to copy and paste the position value on it as well. And what this is going to do is it's going to give it the same position as our overlays. So once we got our light positioned right, we can drag it around here. And we might want to increase the intensity a little, and the radius, of course, too. Now, the radius is basically just how far it shoots out, and the intensity is like, you know, the brightness of the light. So we're going to move these around. I'm going to do kind of a, not too dark, but I don't want it to be like necessarily too bright. So we're going to move this one over here. Going to lower the intensity a bunch. I don't know why I keep voice cracking. That's like the 5th voice crack recording. All right, nevertheless, for color, we can make this whatever we want. Let's try green, see how that looks. Doesn't really look too good. Maybe blue. Looks a little bit better. So let's just lower the intensity on there. And now the best part about lighting is you can combine it. So if I duplicate the light by Control C, Control V, we can position it over here and light more of the area in the back. So let's try this maybe. And then light options, intensity, will increase this as well. I think we still need to position it further back, get more of the stuff like the greens over here. So let's move it out over here. And then what we're gonna do now is change the color on it as well. Let's try red. I'm just curious to how that'll look. Okay, it doesn't really look good at all. Maybe blue? No, not blue. Maybe just like a normal, like that maybe. Lower the brightness even more. And as you guys can see, now we have lighting in our scene. So this is what it looks like without it. Pretty monotone, pretty dull almost, but when we add the lights on it, it gives more of sort of like some depth perspective to it. So now if I unsolo everything and I show you guys what we have here, let me make sure that the little gun model is on top. Now as you can see, our little guy in the back's not composited too well, and that's because we still haven't even used the depth layer. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna Control Alt Y, make an adjustment layer, and let's enable the depth layer. And now what I'm gonna do is go to Luma Map, and I'm gonna enable it to the depth. So what I can do now is add maybe another tint. Let's just try this one, for example. Maybe make it like, I guess blue maybe. Now we can make some fog on here. So let me add levels as well onto the depth map. So now that we got levels on there, if I go like this maybe, we can kind of add some fog in. So the way depth maps work is the white is more affected than the black, or vice versa, depending on what you do here. So I'll show you guys. If we hide the depth layer, as you can see, we got some like sort of green blue fog in the background, or I can make it near. So if I replace it to invert it, it's going to be closer, and if I have it on just Luma, it's going to be further. Now it doesn't look like fog too much, and that's because our blacks aren't affected, which is basically going to make it so that like some of it is still visible, which is like the normal map, as you can see, because it's like monochrome. So if we make it the same color as this, as you can see, now it's pretty much the exact same, so it's going to create a sort of fog effect. Now I don't like doing the exact same. I usually have them just slightly different from each other for when I'm creating fog. So something like this maybe. And if we want the guy in the front to be affected, we just drag him below the adjustment layer. So boom, as you can see, he's kind of composited a lot better, because with it on top, it's not going to be affected, but with it like that, it's going to be affected. Now what I like to do is I like to have 2 depth maps on my scene. So what I'll do is I'll duplicate these by Control C and Control V. So now we have 2 different depth layers going through. Now, as you can see, I didn't really do much besides make the fog way more intense, which is not what I wanted. So what I'm going to do now is invert the depth map. So now we have some sort of like shading on the front and shading on the back as well. So if I lower these a lot, and let's go back here, we'll enable our depth layer, highlight and solo it. I want to bring it further back like this maybe. So after messing around with the depth for a while, I managed to make it look like this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drag this one below the gun layer so that the hand's not affected. And I'm going to mess with the colors some more. So, you know, this is kind of an ugly one, so we'll make it something like maybe just black, honestly, will work fine. Like a really dark blue. So as you guys can see, the foreground is pretty dark and the background has the fog. And we still have our particles composited with all the lighting. Now you will notice that there is some sort of clipping going around on our depth layer. And that's just because of how low quality it is. So we can do, if we wanted, we can add a Gaussian blur on it. Which isn't the best idea. But in this instance, it'll work because our gun is just going to be, our view model is just going to be overlaid on top. So like this doesn't really matter. But if you have stuff in the foreground that really needs to be sharp, you probably don't want to do this, but in this instance it's fine. So if we add the Gaussian blur, make sure repeat edges is enabled, turn it off. Now you'll notice that our shading is a lot smoother. So it's starting to come together, except the last thing we need to do is composite our view model, which is our little hand right here. So I'm gonna add another tint on it as well, and we're just gonna make it like a blue or something. And we're pretty much done, guys. As you guys can see, this is how our composite looks. So we got a guy who's running kind of like out of a dark void, and we got a bunch of stuff motion tracked, a bunch of overlays, and you can motion track anything. You can do particles, overlays, lines, text, whatever you want, and it'll all be blended in like this. Now, if you want to learn how to do depth of field, it's pretty easy. I'll show you how to. So what we're going to do is duplicate the depth map and the adjustment layer right here, except this is going to be different. I'm going to remove every effect off the adjustment layer and every effect off the depth layer. So we just have these two. Now I'm also going to turn off the track matte. So basically this is just going to be a raw depth layer, and then this is going to be a depth blur layer. Now you will need plugins for this, or you could use the camera's depth of field blur, but it's not going to affect the actual like clips. But nevertheless, I wouldn't even bother with that because that's some like pretty much more advanced stuff that we're not really going to even notice in this video. So we're going to go back to our depth layer and our raw depth layer. Both of these have no effects. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add a plugin called FL depth of field. You can also use crossfire bokeh, but I think it's kind of more buggy with this. But anyway, with FL depth of field, we're going to select the depth layer, go to the depth layer, which is our raw depth right here, and then we're going to increase the radius on this. And now what we're going to do now is find a focal point. So this is like the area that's in focus. So if we go like to the middle where the guy is dying, we can see that if we increase this, we'll blur pretty much everything except that area. So after playing around, I managed to find like the focal point, and the focal point is like the same as like a focal point on a camera. It's basically the part that's in focus. So I think the radius is still too high, so we're gonna lower this like that. And as you guys can see, now we got some depth of field blur. So this is without, this is with it. As you can see, it's just using the depth pass to determine where to like blur everything else. Now if you want to get it actually accurate, I'll leave a link to Luminal's tutorial down below, where Luminal goes into depth about how to make like all your assets composite with the depth map, and it's kind of tedious and it's pretty advanced, so I'll leave it to Luminal's tutorial to explain it. But essentially what it is you pre-compose all your overlays onto the depth map to be able to get a more accurate blur. But anyway, once you're done compositing all your overlays, your lighting, your effects, and all that good stuff, the last thing is you're probably wondering, how do I actually like use this in an edit? Well, it's pretty simple. What I usually do is I select everything, so Control A, and then I'm just gonna pre-compose it, and we'll just call this like frag 1. Now this shouldn't be allowed at all. If you have a ton of stuff in here, it'll probably automatically go to move all attributes, but that's what we want. So if we have it like this, and if I Control Shift D here and Control Shift D over here, now we can pretty much timer map the whole thing. And this is why I told you to enable frame blending on the overlays, which I don't know if I forgot any. I hope I didn't. Nope, they all have frame blending. And yeah, that's the reason I told you to enable frame blending, is so when you do timer map or Twixtor or whatever you're doing, that your overlays aren't going to be clipping and look all like stuttery, almost like they're lagging. So yeah, that's pretty much how you timer map and do all this. And then of course you can make an adjustment layer, you know, slap a preset on. I think I have a preset called blue cheese. Let's slap it on here, see how this looks. But yeah, that's pretty much how to composite effects. As you guys can see, it looks pretty good so far. I'll probably go into more detail in like a part 2 to this video because there's just so much more I need to explain. But that's how you motion track and composite overlays on here. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, guys. I make videos on editing and all sorts of other cool stuff. stuff. I really hope you enjoyed the video, guys. My editing pack, presets, and overlays and all that good stuff will be in the description down below, so if you guys want to buy my project files to learn how I do this stuff in more detail, or just save yourself countless hours without having to recreate these effects, you can buy the editing pack in the description down below. Don't forget to follow my social media, my Twitter, my Instagram, and my Discord server are all in the description down below. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching and happy editing. Peace out, guys.